The whispers started the moment Katherine Thompson's dress no longer hung loose around her waist, and by the time she could not hide the swell of her belly beneath even the most cleverly draped shawl, the congregation of the First Baptist Church of Socorro had already decided her fate. Katherine sat in the back pew that Sunday morning, in March of 1877, her hands folded over the life growing inside her, trying to make herself as small as possible. The preacher's wife had pulled her aside before the service began, her lips pressed into a thin line of righteous disapproval. The words still echoed in Katherine's ears like the toll of a funeral bell. She was not welcome here anymore. Her sin was too visible, too shameful, too much of a stain on their pristine community. The father of her child, a traveling salesman who had promised her the world and left her with nothing but heartache and consequences, had disappeared into the vast expanse of the New Mexico territory months ago. She had been foolish and trusting, and now she would pay the price alone. She stood when the hymn began, her voice catching in her throat as she tried to sing along. Around her, the other women shifted away, creating a physical space that matched the emotional chasm between them. Mrs. Henderson clutched her daughter closer, as if Katherine's condition might somehow be contagious. Mr. Morris refused to meet her eyes. Even the children, usually so innocent and kind, had learned from their parents to turn away. When the service ended, Katherine gathered her worn shawl and made her way toward the door. Reverend Patterson stepped into her path, his face a mask of stern judgment that left no room for mercy. "Miss Thompson," he said, his voice carrying across the nearly empty church, "the elders and I have discussed your situation at length. We cannot in good conscience allow you to remain part of this congregation while you are living in such obvious sin. Until you have repented and shown true remorse for your transgressions, you are no longer welcome in this house of God." Katherine felt the words strike her like physical blows. Her throat tightened and tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of these people who had once claimed to love their neighbors as themselves. "I understand," she managed to say, though her voice trembled. "I will trouble you no further." She walked out of the church into the bright New Mexico sunshine, the heat already rising from the dusty streets of Socorro despite the early spring morning. Behind her, she heard the murmur of voices, the satisfied tones of people who believed they had done the right thing. She had nowhere to go. Her parents had died of fever 2 years prior, leaving her with nothing but a small adobe house on the edge of town and a modest inheritance that was nearly depleted. She had been working as a seamstress, but even those clients had begun to turn away once word of her pregnancy spread. Katherine walked home, through the emptying streets, past the mercantile and the saloon, past the blacksmith shop where the clang of hammer on metal rang out in steady rhythm. She kept her head high, though inside she felt herself crumbling. What would she do now? How would she provide for herself and her baby? The questions circled in her mind like buzzards over carrion. She reached her small house and let herself inside, closing the door behind her and finally allowing the tears to fall. She sank onto her narrow bed and wept until she had no tears left, her hands cradling her belly where her child grew, innocent and unaware of the harsh world waiting beyond the safety of her womb. That afternoon, as Katherine sat at her table trying to calculate how long her remaining money would last, she heard horses outside and then a knock at her door. She wiped her eyes and smoothed her dress before answering, expecting perhaps Mrs. Wilson, the one woman in town who had shown her any kindness in recent weeks. Instead, she found herself face to face with a man she had seen around town but never spoken to. He was tall and lean, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of the sky before a storm. He held his hat in his hands, and his dark hair was slightly too long, curling at his collar. He wore the dusty clothes of a working cowboy, his boots scuffed, and his vest worn but well cared for. "Miss Thompson," he said, his voice low and respectful. "My name is Nathan Ellis. I hope I am not intruding." Katherine blinked in surprise. "Mr. Ellis, I know who you are." Everyone in Socorro knew Nathan Ellis. He worked on the Double R Ranch outside of town, had a reputation as an honest man and a skilled horseman. He kept to himself mostly, attended church sporadically, and was known for his quiet kindness to those in need. "What can I do for you?" Nathan shifted his weight, looking almost uncomfortable. "I was at church this morning. I heard what Reverend Patterson said to you. I heard how they treated you." He met her eyes, and she saw no judgment there, only a deep sadness. "It was not right, Miss Thompson. It was not Christian, no matter what they claim. Katherine felt her throat tighten again. That is kind of you to say, Mr. Ellis, but I am not sure why you are here. Nathan took a deep breath, as if steadying himself for something difficult. I have a proposition for you, if you will hear me out. I know you do not know me well, and you have no reason to trust me, but I promise you my intentions are honorable. She studied him for a long moment, then stepped back and gestured for him to enter. He came inside, his presence seeming to fill the small space. He remained standing, turning his hat in his hands. I have been thinking about this all through the service and during the ride home, Nathan began. You need help, Miss Thompson. You need protection and support, especially with a baby coming. And I have been alone for too long, working my days and returning to an empty bunkhouse each night. I have saved my wages carefully over the years. I have enough to provide for a family, if you are willing. Katherine stared at him, not quite understanding. What are you suggesting, Mr. Ellis? I am suggesting marriage, he said simply. A real marriage, legal and binding. I would give you my name, my protection, and my support. Your child would be legitimate, with a father to provide for them. You would not have to face this alone. The words hung in the air between them. Katherine felt dizzy, as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. You do not even know me, she whispered. Why would you do such a thing? Nathan was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. I lost my parents when I was young, Miss Thompson. I know what it is to be alone in this world, to have nowhere to turn. I also know that God forgives our mistakes, our moments of weakness. If He can forgive us, then surely His people should be able to do the same. But they do not always. They cast stones and judge, and they forget that we are all sinners in need of grace. He took a step closer, his eyes earnest. I am not a perfect man. I have made my own mistakes, done things I am not proud of. But I try to live by what I believe is right, and I believe it is right to help someone in need. If you will have me, I promise I will be a good husband to you and a good father to your child. I will not ask for more than you are willing to give. I only ask that we try to build something good together. Katherine's mind reeled. This man, this stranger, was offering her salvation when everyone else had turned their backs. It seemed too good to be true, and yet as she looked into his eyes, she saw only sincerity. I do not love you, she said softly, needing him to understand. I do not even know you. I know, Nathan replied, but love can grow, given time and care. My own parents barely knew each other when they married, and they built a strong partnership over the years. I am not asking you to love me today, Miss Thompson. I am only asking you to give us both a chance at something better than what we have now. Katherine wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. What other choice did she have? She could try to survive on her own, but with no income and a baby coming, she would likely end up destitute. She could try to leave Socorro, but where would she go? She had no family, no friends who would take her in. This man was offering her a lifeline, and refusing it out of pride or fear seemed foolish. Why do you not have a wife already? She asked, needing to know. You are a good man, Mr. Ellis. Surely there are women who would be happy to marry you. A shadow crossed his face. I was engaged once, several years ago. Her name was Mary. She died of cholera 2 weeks before our wedding. After that, I threw myself into my work and never looked for anyone else. It seemed easier to be alone than to risk that kind of pain again. He met her eyes. But I am tired of being alone, Miss Thompson, and I think you need someone who will stand beside you, no matter what anyone else says. Katherine felt something shift inside her chest, a tiny spark of hope in the darkness that had consumed her day. If we do this, she said slowly, I need you to promise me something. Promise me you will never throw my past in my face. Promise me you will never use it against me when we argue or when times are hard. I promise, Nathan said without hesitation. What is past is past. We move forward from here. She nodded, her decision made. Then yes, Mr. Ellis, I will marry you. Relief flooded Nathan's face, and he actually smiled, transforming his serious features into something warmer. Call me Nathan, please, and may I call you Katherine? Yes, she said, and found herself smiling back despite everything. When did you want to do this? As soon as possible, Nathan replied. There is a justice of the peace in town, Judge Morrison. We could go see him tomorrow if you are agreeable, The sooner you have my name, the better protected you will be from gossip and judgment." They made their plans, and Nathan left with a promise to return first thing in the morning. After he had gone, Katherine sat in her quiet house and wondered if she had just made the best decision of her life or the worst. Only time would tell. That night, she barely slept. Her mind churned with questions and fears, but also with a strange anticipation. She had been so certain her life was over, that she would spend the rest of her days as an outcast, a cautionary tale told to young women about the dangers of trusting the wrong man. Now, suddenly, she had a future again. It might not be the future she had once dreamed of, but it was something. Nathan arrived at her door just after dawn, clean-shaven and wearing what she suspected were his best clothes. He had brought a small bouquet of wildflowers, which he presented to her with an almost shy smile. "I thought you might like these," he said. "I know this is not a traditional wedding, but I wanted you to have something to mark the occasion." Katherine took the flowers, touched by the gesture. "They are beautiful, thank you." They walked together through the waking town, past the same buildings she had passed the day before, in shame and despair. This morning felt different. She had Nathan beside her, solid and steady, and she found strength in his presence. Judge Morrison lived above his office on the main street. He answered their knock, still tucking in his shirt, his white eyebrows rising when he saw Nathan and Katherine together. "Mr. Ellis," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "What brings you here so early?" "We would like to be married, Judge," Nathan said simply. "This morning, if you are willing." The judge's gaze moved to Katherine, taking in her condition with the practiced eye of someone who had seen much in his years. She lifted her chin, refusing to look away. "I see," Judge Morrison said slowly. He looked back at Nathan. "You are certain about this, son? You know what people will say." "I am certain," Nathan replied firmly. "And I do not care what people say. God forgives, and they should too." Something flickered in the judge's eyes, something that might have been approval. "Well then, come in. Let me get my book and we will make this official." The ceremony was brief and simple, conducted in the judge's small office with his housekeeper serving as a witness. Nathan spoke his vows in a clear, steady voice, promising to love and honor Katherine for all the days of his life. When it was her turn, Katherine found her voice shaking with emotion as she made the same promises to this man who had rescued her from despair. Nathan slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, and Katherine was surprised to feel tears on her cheeks. They were not tears of sadness, but of gratitude and relief. She was not alone anymore. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Judge Morrison said. "You may kiss your bride, Mr. Ellis." Nathan looked at Katherine, a question in his eyes. She nodded slightly, and he leaned down and pressed a gentle, respectful kiss to her lips. It was brief and chaste, but Katherine felt the warmth of it all the way to her toes. They signed the marriage certificate, paid the judge his fee, and walked back out into the morning sunshine as husband and wife. Nathan offered her his arm, and Katherine took it, feeling the solid muscle beneath the fabric of his shirt. "We should get your things and move you out to the ranch," Nathan said as they walked. "I spoke with Mr. Reynolds yesterday, and he has agreed to let us have one of the small houses on the property. It is not much, but it is clean and sound. We can make it into a real home." Katherine nodded, still feeling as if she were in a dream. They went to her house and packed her belongings, which did not take long. She had so little left. Nathan loaded everything into a wagon he had borrowed, handling her few precious possessions with care. As they prepared to leave Socorro, Katherine looked back at the little adobe house where she had lived since her parents' death. So much had happened within those walls, so much grief and loss, and now this strange new beginning. She turned away and climbed up onto the wagon seat beside Nathan, ready to leave the past behind. The ride to the Double R Ranch took about an hour. The landscape rolled past them, all red earth and scattered scrub, with the distant mountains rising purple against the sky. Nathan pointed out landmarks along the way, his voice easy and comfortable. He told her about the ranch, about the horses and cattle they raised, about the men he worked with. Katherine found herself relaxing slightly, lulled by the steady rhythm of the wagon and Nathan's calm presence. The ranch house came into view first, a sprawling structure built of adobe and wood. Beyond it were the bunkhouses, the barns, the corrals where horses moved in restless circles. Nathan drove past all of it to a small house set slightly apart, nestled in the shade of a few scraggly cottonwood trees. "Here we are," he said, pulling the wagon to a stop. "It is not fancy, but the roof is good and the walls are thick. It will keep us cool in summer and warm in winter." He helped her down from the wagon, and Katherine got her first real look at what would be her new home. It was indeed small, just 3 rooms by the look of it, but it had windows with real glass and a front porch where she could imagine sitting in the evenings. Nathan unlocked the door and stood back to let her enter first. The interior was sparse but clean. There was a main room with a fireplace, a small kitchen area, and through a doorway she could see a bedroom with a simple iron bedstead. Nathan had clearly been here already, preparing. There was wood stacked by the fireplace, dishes in the kitchen, linens on the bed. "I know it needs a woman's touch," Nathan said from behind her, "but I thought at least it should be livable from the start. We can get whatever else you need from town." Katherine turned to face him, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness. "You did all this for me? For us?" "I wanted you to feel welcome," Nathan said simply. "This is your home now, Katherine. Yours and mine and the baby's." The way he said it, including her unborn child so naturally, made Katherine's throat tighten with emotion. She had expected judgment, or at least some reservation, but Nathan seemed to have accepted the whole situation completely. "Thank you," she whispered. "You cannot know what this means to me." Nathan smiled and began unloading the wagon, carrying her belongings inside with the easy strength of a man accustomed to hard physical labor. Katherine watched him, this stranger who was now her husband, and wondered at the twist of fate that had brought them together. That first day passed in a blur of settling in and getting acquainted with her new surroundings. Nathan showed her around the ranch, introducing her to the foreman and some of the other hands. If they were surprised by Nathan's sudden marriage, they hid it well, tipping their hats to Katherine with respect. She suspected Nathan had already spoken to them, prepared them for her arrival. As evening approached, Katherine prepared their first meal together in the small kitchen, using the supplies Nathan had stocked. It was simple fare, beans and cornbread, but Nathan ate with apparent appreciation, complimenting her cooking. After dinner, as darkness fell outside, an awkward silence descended. They were married but still strangers, and the reality of their situation suddenly felt very present. There was only one bedroom, only one bed. Nathan must have sensed her discomfort because he stood and cleared his throat. "I will sleep out here on the floor tonight," he said. "You take the bed. I meant what I said earlier, Katherine. I will not ask more of you than you are willing to give. We can take this as slow as you need." Relief and gratitude flooded through her. "You are very kind," she said softly. "I am your husband," Nathan replied. "It is my job to make you feel safe and cared for." Katherine lay in bed that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling around her, and the quiet breathing of the man sleeping on the floor in the next room. She placed her hands on her belly, feeling the flutter of movement within. Her baby, her child, who would now have a name and a father and a chance at a good life. Whatever else happened, she had given her baby that much. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Nathan rose before dawn to tend to his duties on the ranch, working with the horses that were his specialty. Katherine kept the house, cooked their meals, and slowly began to explore her new world. She was unused to ranch life, having grown up in town, but she found herself fascinated by it. The wide open spaces, the animals, the hard, honest work that filled each day. Nathan was patient with her, answering her questions and showing her how things worked. He brought her to see the new foals in the barn, their long legs still wobbly, their dark eyes full of curiosity. He taught her which horses were gentle enough for her to approach, letting her feel the warmth of their breath on her palm as they lipped treats from her hand. In the evenings, they sat together on the porch as the heat of the day faded into cool night air. They talked, getting to know each other slowly, carefully. Nathan told her about his childhood, about the parents he had lost to an Apache raid when he was 12, about the years he spent drifting from ranch to ranch before settling here. Katherine told him about her own parents, about her father's dreams of prosperity in the West and her mother's quiet strength. She even told him, haltingly, about the man who had fathered her child, about his smooth words and easy promises, and the way he had disappeared like smoke when she told him she was expecting. "He was a coward," Nathan said when she finished, his voice hard. "A real man takes responsibility for his actions. He does not run." "I was foolish to believe him," Katherine said, shame coloring her voice. Nathan reached over and took her hand, his calloused palm warm against hers. You trusted someone you thought cared for you. That is not foolish, Katherine. That is human. He is the one who should be ashamed, not you." His words, his steadfast support, began to heal something inside her that she had not even realized was broken. She had spent so long carrying the weight of her shame, believing that her situation was entirely her fault, that she deserved the judgment that had been heaped upon her. Nathan's gentle insistence that she was worthy of kindness and respect slowly began to change how she saw herself. As the weeks passed, Katherine felt her body changing, her belly growing rounder, her movements becoming slower and more deliberate. Nathan watched over her with quiet concern, taking over tasks that became too difficult for her, always there with a steadying hand when she needed it. One Sunday morning, about 6 weeks after their marriage, Nathan asked if she wanted to attend church in town. Katherine's immediate reaction was panic, the memory of her last visit still painfully fresh. "I do not think I can face them," she admitted. "Not yet." Nathan nodded in understanding. "Then we will have our own service here. God does not live only in that church building, Katherine. He is everywhere, if we are willing to look." They sat together on the porch, and Nathan read aloud from his worn Bible, his voice gentle as he spoke the words of comfort and grace. Katherine felt tears slip down her cheeks as she listened to the familiar passages, hearing them differently now, hearing the love and forgiveness that she had somehow missed before under all the judgment and condemnation. "God forgives," Nathan said softly, closing the book, "and they should too. But even if they do not, Katherine, you are forgiven. You are worthy of love and respect. Never doubt that." She looked at this man who had saved her, who continued to save her every day with his kindness and patience, and felt something unfold in her chest. It was not yet love, perhaps, but it was the beginning of it. It was trust and gratitude and a growing affection that warmed her from the inside out. Summer arrived with its scorching heat. Katherine spent her days trying to keep cool, moving slowly through her tasks as her pregnancy advanced. Nathan brought her fresh water from the well, helped her into the shade, worried over her with an attentiveness that was both touching and slightly amusing. "I am not made of glass," she told him one afternoon when he insisted on hanging the laundry for her. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "You are my wife," Nathan replied, his jaw set stubbornly. "I will not risk your health or the baby's because of pride." She gave in, as she always did when he used that tone, and watched him work. The sun had bronzed his skin darker, and she could see the play of muscles beneath his shirt as he moved. She found herself noticing him more and more lately, the way he moved, the sound of his laugh, the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her. The attraction was growing alongside the affection, and sometimes at night, lying alone in the bed while he slept on the floor in the other room, she wondered if he felt the same stirring of desire. It was late July when the first real test of their marriage arrived. Katherine was in the kitchen preparing lunch when she heard voices outside, raised in anger. She went to the door and saw Nathan standing in the yard facing Reverend Patterson and 2 of the church elders. Her heart sank. "We have come to speak with Miss Thompson," the Reverend was saying, his voice cold and formal. "Mrs. Ellis," Nathan corrected firmly. "Katherine is my wife. You will address her with respect." "We need to speak with her about her immortal soul," Elder Roberts said. "She left our congregation under a cloud of sin. We want to offer her the chance to repent and return to the fold." Katherine stepped out onto the porch before Nathan could respond. "I am here," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "What is it you want to say to me?" Reverend Patterson turned his stern gaze on her. "We have heard that you married in haste, Mrs. Ellis. We worry that you have compounded one sin with another, trapping this good man into taking responsibility for another man's mistake." "Nathan is my husband by his own choice," Katherine said, anger beginning to burn through her fear. "He asked me to marry him. I did not trap anyone. Nevertheless," the Reverend continued, "you are still living in sin. That child you carry is a constant reminder of your fall from grace. Until you have truly repented and shown proper contrition, your soul remains in jeopardy." Nathan moved to stand beside Katherine on the porch, his presence solid and supportive. "With all due respect, Reverend, I think you and your elders need to reread your own scripture. Jesus spent his time with sinners, with outcasts, with people that society had rejected. He showed them love and compassion, not judgment and condemnation. We are offering spiritual guidance, Elder Roberts protested. No, Nathan said flatly. You are offering judgment disguised as concern. Katherine is my wife. She is under my protection and my care. She has repented for her mistakes, and God has forgiven her. That should be enough for you and your congregation. You cannot know that God has forgiven her, Reverend Patterson said stiffly. I know that God is love, Nathan replied, and I know that he commands us to love one another, to forgive one another, to show mercy and compassion. Where is your mercy, Reverend? Where is your compassion? You cast Katherine out when she needed support the most. You turned your back on one of your own flock. If anyone needs to repent here, I think it might be you. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Katherine could barely breathe, her heart pounding as she watched the confrontation unfold. No one had ever stood up to the Reverend like this, certainly not on her behalf. Reverend Patterson's face had turned an alarming shade of red. You are impertinent, Mr. Ellis. You risk your own soul by defending this woman's sin. This woman is my wife, Nathan said, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. And if defending her puts my soul at risk, then so be it. I would rather stand before God having shown love and mercy than having shown judgment and cruelty. Now, I am going to have to ask you to leave our property. The three men stared at Nathan for a long moment, then turned and walked stiffly back to their horses. Katherine watched them ride away, her whole body trembling with reaction. As soon as they were out of sight, Nathan turned to her with concern. Are you all right? The baby? We are fine, Katherine said, though her voice shook. Nathan, what you said to them, what you did not have to do that. You have made enemies of powerful men. I spoke the truth, Nathan said simply. He reached out and cupped her face gently in his rough hands. Katherine, I meant every word I said at the judge's office when we married. You are my wife. I will stand beside you against anyone and anything. Church elders, angry mobs, it does not matter. You and this baby are my family now, and I protect what is mine. Katherine felt tears spill over, running down her cheeks onto Nathan's hands. I do not deserve you, she whispered. You deserve better than me, Nathan replied, but I am doing my best to be worthy of you. She looked up into his eyes and saw the truth there, the depth of his commitment to her. Without thinking, acting on instinct and emotion, she rose up on her toes and kissed him. It was different from the chaste kiss they had shared at their wedding. This was deeper, more real, full of all the feelings that had been building inside her over the past weeks. Nathan froze for just a moment, then his arms came around her carefully, mindful of her pregnant belly, and he kissed her back with a tenderness that made her heart ache. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Katherine saw wonder in his eyes. Katherine, he said softly, his voice rough with emotion. I am falling in love with you, she said, needing him to know. I did not think it was possible, but I am. You are the best man I have ever known, Nathan Ellis, and I am grateful every day that you walked into my life. Nathan's face transformed with joy. I have been half in love with you since the day I saw you walk out of that church with your head held high. I wanted to give you time, to let you come to me when you were ready. But Katherine, I love you. I love you so much it terrifies me sometimes. They stood together on the porch, holding each other as gently as if they were made of precious glass, and Katherine felt the last of her defenses crumble. She had been so afraid of trusting again, of opening her heart and risking more pain. But Nathan had earned that trust through patience and kindness, through standing beside her when the whole world seemed arrayed against her. That night, for the first time since their marriage, Nathan did not sleep on the floor in the main room. Katherine invited him into their bedroom, into their bed, and they lay together in the darkness, talking softly about their hopes and dreams for the future. Nathan's hand rested on her belly, feeling the movements of the baby within, and his voice was full of awe. I will love this child as my own, he promised. They will never know any father but me, and they will grow up knowing they are wanted and loved. I know, Katherine whispered, her hand covering his. I trust you, Nathan. Completely. They fell asleep like that, tangled together, and Katherine felt a peace she had not known in months, perhaps years. She was loved. She was safe. She had a future that looked bright with promise. The rest of summer passed in a golden haze. Katherine and Nathan grew closer every day, their bond deepening into something strong and true. They laughed together, worked together, dreamed together. Nathan told her stories of his work with the horses, and Katherine shared her plans for the garden she wanted to plant, for the way she wanted to decorate their little house. They were building a life together, brick by brick, moment by moment. In late August, Katherine felt the first pains. They started as a dull ache in her lower back and gradually intensified over the course of the day. Nathan sent for the midwife, Mrs. Garcia, who lived on a neighboring ranch. She arrived as the sun was setting, her weathered face calm and competent. "First babies usually take their time," she told Nathan with a knowing smile. "Go boil water and find something to occupy yourself. This is women's work now." Nathan looked torn between following orders and staying with Katherine. She reached for his hand, gripping it hard as another pain washed over her. "Stay with me," she said. "Please." Mrs. Garcia raised an eyebrow, but did not object. "If you are going to stay, you might as well make yourself useful. Get those clean linens I asked for." The hours that followed were the longest and hardest of Katherine's life. The pains came harder and faster, stealing her breath and her ability to think. But through it all, Nathan was there, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth, murmuring words of encouragement and love. His presence was an anchor in the storm of pain and fear. It was well past midnight when Mrs. Garcia finally announced that it was time to push. Katherine bore down with all her strength. Nathan's hand gripped so tightly in hers that she knew she must be hurting him, but he never pulled away, never flinched. And then, suddenly, there was a new sound in the room, the thin wail of a newborn baby. "A boy," Mrs. Garcia announced, holding up the squirming, red-faced infant. "You have a son." Katherine collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted but exhilarated. Nathan was staring at the baby with wonder, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. Mrs. Garcia cleaned the baby quickly and efficiently, then laid him in Katherine's arms. He was perfect, with a shock of dark hair and tiny flailing fists. His eyes, when they opened, were a deep blue that might change with time. Katherine felt love flood through her so powerfully, it was almost painful. Her son, her beautiful, perfect son. "What will you name him?" Mrs. Garcia asked as she went about the business of cleaning up. Katherine looked at Nathan, and he smiled through his tears. They had discussed names endlessly over the past weeks. "Joseph," Katherine said softly. "His name is Joseph Ellis." Nathan reached out and gently touched the baby's tiny hand, and Joseph's fingers instinctively curled around one of Nathan's larger ones. "Hello, Joseph," Nathan whispered. "Welcome to the world, son. We have been waiting for you." Mrs. Garcia stayed through the rest of the night, making sure both Katherine and the baby were doing well. By morning, she declared them both healthy and strong, accepted her payment with thanks, and headed home with a promise to check on them in a few days. Nathan and Katherine were left alone with their son, this tiny person who had completely changed their world. Nathan held Joseph with awkward care, his large hands cradling the baby, as if he were made of spun glass. He looked up at Katherine with such love and happiness that she felt her heart might burst. "Thank you," he said softly. "Thank you for trusting me, for giving me this family, for letting me love you." "Thank you for saving me," Katherine replied, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for seeing past my mistakes and giving me a chance at happiness." "I love you, Nathan. I love you so much." He leaned down carefully and kissed her. Joseph nestled safely between them. "I love you too, Katherine. Both of you, my family." The weeks after Joseph's birth were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings, of learning how to care for a newborn and adjust to their new reality as parents. Nathan was surprisingly good with the baby, taking his turn walking the floor when Joseph fussed, changing diapers with only minimal complaint, singing soft lullabies in his deep voice. Katherine watched him with their son and fell even more deeply in love. This was the man who had married her when she was desperate and alone, who had defended her against the judgment of others, who now loved her child as if he were his own flesh and blood. She could not imagine her life without him. It was September when they made the trip back into Socorro together for the first time since their marriage. They needed supplies, and Katherine was determined to hold her head high, to show the town that she was not ashamed of her life or her choices. Joseph was tucked into a sling against her chest, sleeping peacefully, and Nathan walked beside her with his hand resting protectively on her lower back. The first person they encountered was Mrs. Henderson, the woman who had pulled her daughter away from Katherine at church that last Sunday. She stopped dead in the street, staring at them with wide eyes. "Good morning, Mrs. Henderson," Katherine said pleasantly, as if nothing had ever happened. "Mrs. Ellis," the woman replied faintly, her gaze dropping to the baby. "I heard you had married Mr. Ellis, and you have had your baby." "Our son, Joseph," Nathan said proudly. "He is 2 weeks old." Mrs. Henderson's face went through a complicated series of expressions. "He is lovely. Congratulations to you both." She hurried away, and Katherine could practically see her rushing to spread the news. Let them talk. She had nothing to hide anymore. They did their shopping at the Mercantile, where Mr. Johnson was professionally polite, if not overly friendly. They ran into several other townspeople, all of whom seemed unsure how to react to this new version of Katherine, married and respectable, with a handsome husband at her side and a baby in her arms. As they were loading their purchases into the wagon, Reverend Patterson emerged from the church across the street. He stood on the steps, watching them, his face unreadable. Nathan tensed beside Katherine, but she put a calming hand on his arm. "Let it go," she murmured. "He cannot hurt us any more." Nathan relaxed slightly but kept his eyes on the Reverend until they had climbed into the wagon and started the drive back to the ranch. Katherine looked back once and saw the Reverend still standing there, a solitary figure against the white wall of the church. She felt a moment of pity for him, trapped in his rigid beliefs, unable to see the love and grace that surrounded him. If he would only open his eyes. Fall arrived, painting the landscape in shades of gold and amber. Joseph grew and thrived, his serious blue eyes tracking movement, his tiny hands reaching for everything within grasp. Katherine planted her garden, preparing for the spring, and Nathan continued his work with the horses, teaching Katherine how to ride on a gentle mare named Daisy. Life settled into a comfortable pattern. The little house rang with laughter and love. Nathan and Katherine's relationship deepened, the passion between them growing alongside the friendship and respect they had built. Katherine had never known it was possible to be this happy, to feel this complete. Winter came early that year, bringing cold winds and occasional snow. Nathan kept their home warm and secure, and Katherine kept them fed and comfortable. They spent long evenings by the fire, Joseph nestled between them, talking about everything and nothing, simply enjoying being together. It was on one such evening, with snow falling softly outside and the fire crackling merrily, that Katherine brought up something that had been on her mind. "Nathan, I have been thinking about church." Nathan looked up from where he was carving a small wooden horse for Joseph. "Oh? I miss it," Katherine admitted. "Not the judgment or the hypocrisy, but the community, the shared faith, the worship. Do you think we could start attending the small church in the next town over? I heard they have a new minister, young and supposedly quite kind." Nathan set down his carving and considered. "If that is what you want, we can certainly try. I want you to have a spiritual home, Katherine. I want Joseph to grow up knowing about God's love, the real kind, not the conditional love that Patterson and his elders preach." So, the next Sunday, they bundled Joseph up against the cold and made the longer drive to the church in San Antonio, a small town about 15 miles south of Socorro. The church was modest, just a simple building with a wooden cross above the door, but the people who greeted them were genuinely warm. The minister, Reverend Young, was indeed young, probably not even 30, with kind eyes and an easy smile. His sermon was about grace and forgiveness, about loving one another as God loves us. And Katherine felt tears on her cheeks as she listened. This was what church was supposed to be. This was the God she wanted to know and serve. After the service, several people introduced themselves, welcoming them to the congregation. An older woman named Mrs. Sullivan cooed over Joseph and invited them to dinner the following week. No one asked intrusive questions or made Katherine feel judged. It was a revelation. "I like it here," Katherine told Nathan on the ride home. "These people, this church, it feels right." "Then we will come back," Nathan said simply. "As often as you want." They became regulars at the San Antonio church, and slowly Katherine built new friendships with people who did not know her past and did not judge her present. She joined the women's group, helped with church socials, and felt herself healing from the wounds that Reverend Patterson and his congregation had inflicted. Spring returned to New Mexico with an explosion of wildflowers across the desert landscape. Katherine's garden flourished, and Joseph took his first wobbly steps, much to Nathan and Katherine's delight. He was a happy child, quick to smile and laugh, adored by his parents and by the ranch hands who had grown fond of the little family in their midst. One warm afternoon in May, about a year after Joseph's birth, Katherine was working in her garden when Nathan came home early from the range. She looked up, surprised, and saw something serious in his expression. "What is wrong?" she asked immediately, wiping her hands on her apron. Nathan dismounted and came to her, taking her dirty hands in his. "Nothing is wrong, but I need to talk to you about something, and I wanted to do it now, while Joseph is napping and we can speak privately." Katherine's heart began to pound. "You are worrying me." "Do not worry," Nathan said quickly. He led her to the porch, and they sat together on the steps. "Mr. Reynolds has offered me a position as his new foreman. Old Tom is retiring at the end of the summer. It is a good promotion, better pay, more responsibility. We could even get a bigger house, one of the nicer ones closer to the main ranch house." "Nathan, that is wonderful," Katherine said, confused by his serious tone. "Why do you look so concerned?" "Because I wanted to make sure you are happy here first," Nathan said. "Happy with me, with our life, with everything. This last year has been good, Katherine, better than I ever hoped. But if you are not happy, if you want something different, I need to know before I accept this position and bind us even more firmly to this place." Katherine stared at him, love welling up inside her. Even now, with everything they had built together, he was putting her needs and wishes first. "Nathan, I have never been happier in my entire life. This ranch, this house, our life together, it is everything I could have asked for and more. You have given me back my dignity, my hope, my faith in goodness. You have loved me when I did not deserve it, and you have loved my son as your own. If you want to be foreman, then accept the position with my full support and blessing." Relief flooded Nathan's face. "I love you, Katherine, so much. Sometimes I still cannot believe this is real, that you are mine, that we have built this life together." "Believe it," Katherine said, leaning in to kiss him. "Because I am not going anywhere. You are stuck with me, Nathan Ellis, forever." "I can think of worse fates," Nathan said with a grin, pulling her close. Nathan accepted the foreman position, and in late summer, they moved into a larger house on the ranch property. It had 4 bedrooms and a real dining room, and Katherine spent happy weeks furnishing it and making it into a true home. Joseph toddled from room to room, exploring his new domain with enthusiastic curiosity. That fall, Katherine discovered she was pregnant again. The news filled them both with joy and a little trepidation. Joseph was only 18 months old, still needing so much care and attention, but Nathan was thrilled at the prospect of another child, and Katherine found herself equally excited. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she was not carrying the weight of shame and fear alongside the baby. She was surrounded by love and support, and her body seemed to know the routine this time. She bloomed with health, her skin glowing, her energy seemingly boundless. The baby arrived in early May of 1879, another boy they named Thomas after the retiring foreman who had been so kind to them. Thomas was bigger than Joseph had been, with a shock of red gold hair that must have come from Katherine's side of the family. Nathan was besotted, dividing his attention between his 2 sons with the ease of a natural father. Joseph was fascinated by his baby brother, wanting to help with everything, his chubby toddler hands carefully patting Thomas's head under Katherine's watchful supervision. Katherine watched her family and felt a contentment so deep it was almost frightening. She kept waiting for something to go wrong, for the other shoe to drop, but days turned into weeks and months, and nothing but good things happened. They continued to attend church in San Antonio, and Joseph was baptized there when he turned 2, with Thomas following a few months later. Reverend Young spoke of God's love and grace, and Katherine held her sons and felt truly blessed. It was a Sunday afternoon in late summer when they encountered Reverend Patterson again. They were in Socorro to visit the general store, the boys in the wagon bed playing with wooden toys Nathan had made for them. As they passed the church, the Reverend was outside speaking with some parishioners. He looked up as their wagon rolled by, and for a moment, their eyes met. Katherine saw something in his face, something that might have been regret, or perhaps just weariness. She felt no anger toward him anymore, only a distant pity. He had been so certain he was doing God's work by casting her out, and he had been so wrong. She wondered if he had ever realized that. "Are you all right?" Nathan asked quietly, noticing the direction of her gaze. "I am fine," Katherine said, and realized it was true. "I was just thinking that I forgive him. Reverend Patterson, I forgive him for what he did to me. Nathan reached over and squeezed her hand. "You are a better person than I am. I am not sure I have forgiven him yet." "Try," Katherine said softly. "Carrying anger and resentment only hurts us, not him. God forgave me for my mistakes. The least I can do is forgive others for theirs." Nathan was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "You are right, as usual." He smiled at her. "How did I get lucky enough to marry such a wise woman?" "Pure chance," Katherine said with a laugh, "or perhaps divine intervention." "I am inclined to believe the latter," Nathan replied. They drove out of Socorro and back to the ranch, back to their home and their life. The years that followed were good ones, filled with the ordinary joys and struggles of family life. Joseph and Thomas grew into sturdy boys, learning to ride almost before they could walk, helping their father with the horses and soaking up his knowledge and skills. Katherine gave birth to 2 more children over the next 5 years, a daughter they named Grace and then another son, Samuel. Their house rang with noise and laughter, the chaos of a large and happy family. Nathan thrived as foreman, earning the respect of the ranch hands and Mr. Reynolds alike. They prospered modestly but comfortably, never rich but never wanting. Katherine sometimes thought back to that terrible day when she had been cast out of the church, pregnant and alone, believing her life was over. She thought about the despair she had felt, the certainty that she would never be anything but an outcast. And then she looked at Nathan, at their children, at the life they had built together, and she marveled at how wrong she had been. God had not abandoned her in her darkest hour. He had sent her Nathan, a man who embodied grace and love and forgiveness, a man who had looked past her mistakes and seen her worth, a man who had said, "God forgives, they should too," and lived by those words every single day. It was 1885, 8 years after they had married, when Katherine finally felt ready to return to the Socorro church. She had heard through the grapevine that Reverend Patterson had retired and a new minister had taken his place. She was curious to see if the congregation had changed, if they had learned anything from the years that had passed. Nathan was doubtful, but supportive. "If you want to go, we will go. But if they treat you badly, we leave immediately. I will not subject you or the children to that kind of judgment." They dressed in their Sunday best, all 6 of them, and drove into Socorro on a bright Sunday morning. Joseph was now 8 years old, tall and serious like his father. Thomas was 6, red-headed and full of mischief. Grace was 4, a sweet-natured little girl with Katherine's dark eyes. And Samuel was 2, still more baby than boy, clinging to Katherine's skirts. They walked into the church together, Nathan and Katherine side by side, their children arranged around them. Heads turned, conversation stopped. Katherine lifted her chin and smiled, refusing to be intimidated. The new minister, Reverend Campbell, greeted them warmly at the door, shaking Nathan's hand and smiling at the children. He did not seem to know Katherine's history, which was a blessing. They found seats near the back, and Katherine felt dozens of eyes on her throughout the service. After the service ended, as they were filing out, Mrs. Henderson approached them hesitantly. She was older now, grayer, but still the same woman who had turned away from Katherine all those years ago. "Mrs. Ellis," she said quietly, "I wanted to apologize to you for how I treated you back then, for how we all treated you. It was wrong. You were in need, and we failed you. I have regretted it for years." Katherine felt tears prick her eyes. She had not expected this, had not even hoped for it. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. That means more than you know. I forgive you." Mrs. Henderson's eyes filled with tears. "Your husband was right, all those years ago. God forgives, and we should too. I am sorry it took me so long to understand that." Other people approached after that, some apologizing, some simply welcoming them back, some admiring the children and complimenting Katherine and Nathan on their beautiful family. Not everyone was kind. There were still some who turned away with pursed lips and judgmental eyes, but there were enough friendly faces that Katherine felt something loosen in her chest, some last bit of pain finally released. As they drove home, the children chattering in the back of the wagon, Nathan reached over and took Katherine's hand. "How do you feel?" "Lighter," Katherine said, realizing it was true. "I did not realize I was still carrying that weight until it was gone. Thank you for supporting me in going back." "Always," Nathan said simply. "Whatever you need, wherever you want to go, I am with you." "I know," Katherine said, squeezing his hand. "I have always known." They returned to the Socorro Church sporadically after that, sometimes attending there, sometimes going to San Antonio, sometimes holding their own family services at home. Katherine had learned that church was not a building or a group of people. It was a state of heart, a connection to God that existed regardless of location or circumstance. The years continued to roll by, bringing changes and challenges. Mr. Reynolds passed away in 1888, leaving the ranch to his son, who kept Nathan on as foreman. The children grew and changed, Joseph becoming a skilled horseman like his father, Thomas developing a gift for working with cattle, Grace showing a talent for healing and often helping Mrs. Garcia when she was called to tend the sick or injured on neighboring ranches. Samuel grew into a quieter child than his brothers, more bookish and thoughtful. Katherine encouraged his love of reading and learning, saving money to buy him books whenever she could. Perhaps he would not be a rancher like Nathan. Perhaps he would be a teacher or a lawyer or something else entirely. They would support him in whatever path he chose. In 1890, Katherine gave birth to their last child, a daughter they named Hope. She was a surprise, coming a full 6 years after Samuel, when Katherine had thought her childbearing years were behind her. But she was healthy and beautiful, and the older children doted on her, taking turns caring for her and playing with her. Nathan was graying at the temples now, his face more lined, but to Katherine he had never been more handsome. The love between them had only deepened over the years, maturing into something solid and unshakable. They had weathered storms together, raised children together, built a life together from nothing. They knew each other's thoughts before they were spoken, could communicate with a glance across a crowded room. It was on their 15th wedding anniversary, in the spring of 1892, that Nathan surprised Katherine with a gift. He led her outside after dinner, the children having been sent to the neighbors for the evening, and showed her what he had been working on for months. It was a garden, a real garden, enclosed by a white picket fence and filled with every flower and herb she had ever mentioned liking. There was even a bench in the center, positioned to catch the evening sun. "Nathan?" Katherine breathed, tears streaming down her face. "It is beautiful. It is perfect." "You have given me 15 years of happiness," Nathan said, pulling her close. 15 years of love and laughter and everything I never knew I needed. A garden seems like a small thing in comparison. "It is not small," Katherine said, looking up at him. "It is everything, because it shows me that you listen, that you remember, that you care about what makes me happy. I love you, Nathan Ellis. I have loved you from almost the moment I met you, and I will love you until the day I die and beyond." Nathan kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, and Katherine melted into his embrace. They were no longer young, their bodies marked by years of hard work and childbearing, but the passion between them burned as brightly as ever. They made love that night in their bed, the window open to let in the cool spring air and the scent of the flowers from her new garden. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Nathan's hand traced lazy patterns on her skin. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been?" he asked quietly. "If I had not offered to marry you that day?" "Sometimes," Katherine admitted, "but only to be grateful that you did. I do not know what would have become of me and Joseph if you had not stepped in. I probably would have ended up destitute, maybe dead. Instead, I have this incredible life, this beautiful family, this love that fills every corner of my heart. You saved me, Nathan. In every way, a person can be saved." "You saved me too," Nathan said softly. "I was just existing before you, going through the motions, but not really living. You gave me purpose and joy and a reason to come home at the end of every day. You taught me what it means to truly love someone, to build a partnership based on trust and respect and genuine affection. I am a better man because of you, Katherine." They held each other as sleep claimed them, two souls so intertwined that it was hard to tell where one ended and the other began. The years marched on, bringing both joys and sorrows. Katherine's best friend from the San Antonio church, Mrs. Sullivan, passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 72. Katherine mourned her deeply, but was grateful for the friendship they had shared. Joseph married a sweet girl named Emma from a neighboring ranch when he was 22, and they built a house on the Double R property not far from Nathan and Katherine. A year later, they made Katherine and Nathan grandparents with the birth of a baby girl they named Katherine in her honor. Katherine held her namesake and marveled at the circle of life, at how far she had come from that frightened pregnant girl who had been cast out of her church. Now she was a grandmother, respected in her community, loved by her family, secure in her place in the world. Thomas followed his brother's example, marrying at 23 and settling nearby. Grace, to everyone's surprise, announced her intention to go to nursing school in Santa Fe. Katherine and Nathan discussed it at length, worried about sending their daughter so far away, but ultimately supporting her dream. Grace left in the fall of 1897, promising to write every week. Samuel, as Katherine had suspected, proved to have academic talents. With their blessing and financial support, he went to study law in Albuquerque, eventually becoming a lawyer and setting up practice in Socorro. He married a schoolteacher named Rebecca, and they lived in town, hosting Sunday dinners that Katherine and Nathan attended regularly. Hope grew into a beautiful young woman, with her mother's dark eyes and her father's quiet strength. She helped Katherine with the household and showed no inclination to leave, seeming content to remain at home for the time being. It was 1902, 25 years after their marriage, when Katherine and Nathan decided to take a trip. The children were grown, the grandchildren were being well cared for by their parents, and they had the time and resources to do something they had always talked about but never managed. They took the train to California, spending 2 weeks seeing the ocean, walking on beaches, marveling at sights they had only read about in books. On their last evening, standing on the beach watching the sun set over the Pacific Ocean, Nathan pulled Katherine close and kissed the top of her head. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" Katherine asked, leaning into his warmth. "For saying yes. That day when I came to your door with my ridiculous proposal, you could have turned me away. You had every reason to. But you took a chance on me, on us, and you gave me the best 25 years of my life. I just wanted you to know how grateful I am for that." Katherine turned in his arms to face him, the dying light painting everything in shades of gold and rose. "I should be thanking you. You rescued me when I had nowhere else to turn. You gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams. You loved me when I felt unlovable. You became a father to Joseph when you had no obligation to do so. You built this family with me, brick by brick, day by day. Nathan, you were the love of my life. Marrying you was the best decision I ever made." They kissed as the sun slipped below the horizon, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful and lasting. The past was behind them, forgiven and released. The future stretched ahead, full of promise and possibility. But the present, this moment, was perfect. They returned to the ranch refreshed and rejuvenated, ready to embrace the next chapter of their lives. Nathan was in his early 50s now, still strong and capable, but thinking about eventually retiring and passing the foreman duties to Joseph, who had proven himself more than capable. Katherine was 46, her dark hair streaked with silver, her face lined but still beautiful. They had weathered the years well, together. The early years of the new century brought changes to Socorro and the surrounding territory. New Mexico was moving towards statehood, though it would take several more years to achieve. The railroad brought more people and more commerce. The wild days of the Old West were fading into memory, replaced by something more settled and civilized. In 1905, Joseph and Emma welcomed their fourth child, and Nathan remarked to Katherine that he had never imagined being a grandfather to so many. Thomas and his wife had 3 children, and even Samuel and Rebecca had 2. Grace had married a doctor she met during her nursing training and now worked alongside him in Santa Fe, though they visited as often as they could. Hope, now 23, had finally caught the eye of a young rancher from across the valley, and a wedding was being planned for the spring. Katherine stood in her garden one afternoon, the garden Nathan had built for her all those years ago, and counted her blessings. 10 grandchildren and counting, 5 children who had grown into good, kind adults. A husband who still made her heart flutter when he smiled at her. She had more than she had ever dared to dream of. That evening, as had become their custom, she and Nathan sat together on their porch watching the sunset. It was just the two of them now, Hope having moved into her own small house in preparation for her marriage. The quiet was both peaceful and slightly strange after so many years of children filling every corner of their home. "Do you remember what I said to those church elders?" Nathan asked suddenly. "That day they came to our house, all those years ago?" "God forgives, they should too," Katherine quoted. "I remember. It was the bravest thing I had ever seen." "I was terrified," Nathan admitted with a soft laugh. "Standing up to a reverend and church elders? I thought they might run me out of town. But I could not let them hurt you, Katherine. I could not let them make you feel ashamed of yourself when you had nothing to be ashamed of." "You changed my life that day," Katherine said. "You changed it again when you proposed marriage, and you have kept changing it every day since, making it better and richer and fuller. I know I have said it 1,000 times, but I love you, Nathan Ellis, with everything I am." "And I love you," Nathan replied, "more than words can express. You are my heart, Katherine, my home, my everything." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and the stars began to emerge. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. The night air was cool and sweet, carrying the scent of Katherine's flowers and the distant smell of horses and hay. Hope's wedding in the spring of 1906 was a joyous affair, held at the San Antonio church with half the county in attendance. She was radiant in a dress Katherine had helped her sew, and her young husband, Michael, could not take his eyes off her. Katherine cried happy tears, and Nathan squeezed her hand, understanding without words. After the ceremony, at the reception held in the church hall, an unexpected guest appeared. It was one of the elders from the Socorro Church, Elder Roberts, now ancient and stooped with age. He approached Katherine and Nathan hesitantly, leaning heavily on a cane. "Mrs. Ellis, Mr. Ellis," he said, his voice quavering, "I hope I am not intruding. I heard about the wedding and wanted to come pay my respects." "Elder Roberts," Katherine said, surprised but not displeased. "It is good to see you. Thank you for coming." The old man looked at her with watery eyes. "I wanted to apologize to you, Mrs. Ellis. I have carried the weight of what we did to you for almost 30 years now. It was wrong, so very wrong. We were supposed to be shepherds caring for our flock, and instead we cast out someone who needed us most. I am sorry. I know it is far too late, but I wanted you to know that I am sorry." Katherine felt Nathan tense beside her, but she reached out and placed a gentle hand on the elder's arm. "It is never too late for an apology, Elder Roberts, and it is never too late for forgiveness. I forgave you and the others years ago. I hope you can forgive yourself and find peace." The old man's eyes filled with tears. "You are a remarkable woman. Mrs. Ellis, your husband was right when he said God forgives, and we should too. I wish I had understood that sooner. I wish we all had." He shuffled away, and Katherine watched him go, with a mixture of sadness and relief. Even now, after all these years, people were still learning the lessons that Nathan had tried to teach them so long ago. She hoped it would make them kinder to the next person who stumbled, who made a mistake, who needed grace instead of judgment. The years continued their steady march. Nathan finally retired as foreman in 1910, passing the responsibilities to Joseph with confidence and pride. He was 60 years old and ready to slow down, to spend his days helping out where needed, but no longer carrying the weight of the entire ranch on his shoulders. Katherine was 51, still active and engaged, but grateful that Nathan would be around more, that they would have more time together. They traveled a bit, visiting their children and grandchildren, taking short trips to places they had always wanted to see. They grew old together, their bodies slowing, but their love as strong as ever. Nathan's hair turned white, and his hands developed arthritis that made detailed work difficult. Katherine's eyesight grew worse, requiring her to wear spectacles for reading and sewing. But they were together, and that was all that mattered. They had built a legacy, not just in their children and grandchildren, but in how they had lived their lives. They had shown that love and forgiveness were stronger than judgment, that grace was more powerful than condemnation, that families came in all forms and all were worthy of respect and dignity. In 1915, Socorro celebrated its annual Founders' Day festival. Katherine and Nathan attended, now in their late 60s and 70s, respectively, walking slowly through the festivities arm in arm. They were greeted warmly by townspeople, many of whom were too young to remember the scandal that had once surrounded Katherine. To this generation, they were simply Mr. and Mrs. Ellis, respected members of the community, parents and grandparents to large and thriving families. At one point, they passed the church where Katherine had been cast out so many years ago. She paused, looking at the building, and felt only peace. The hurt had faded long ago, replaced by understanding and forgiveness. She had learned that churches were made of people, and people were flawed. But God's love was perfect and unconditional, and that was what mattered. "Are you all right?" Nathan asked, following her gaze. "I am fine," Katherine said, smiling up at him. "I was just thinking about how far we have come, how much has changed." "Some things never change," Nathan said, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. "I love you just as much today as I did the day I married you. Maybe more. Definitely more," Katherine said with a laugh. "We barely knew each other then. Now you know all my secrets, all my flaws, and you love me anyway." "There is no anyway about it," Nathan said. "I love you because of who you are, flaws and all. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Katherine. The very best thing." They continued through the festival, enjoying the food and music and the company of friends and family. Joseph and Emma were there with their children, as were Thomas and his family, Samuel and Rebecca with their growing brood. Grace had come from Santa Fe with her husband and children. Hope and Michael lived locally and rarely missed such events. The combined Ellis clan took up a significant portion of the festival grounds. As evening fell and the dancing began, Nathan bowed formally to Katherine and offered his hand. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Ellis?" "You may, Mr. Ellis," Katherine replied with mock formality, taking his hand. They moved on to the dance floor, their steps slower than they once were, but still graceful, still in sync. They had danced together countless times over the years, at weddings and celebrations, in their kitchen when music drifted through the windows, in their bedroom in the quiet hours of the night. Each dance was precious, a moment out of time where nothing existed but the two of them and their love. As the music swelled, Nathan pulled Katherine closer, and she rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Around them, their children and grandchildren danced and laughed, the future they had created together flourishing in ways they could never have imagined. "Thank you for marrying me," Katherine whispered. "Thank you for saying yes," Nathan whispered back. They swayed together under the stars, two souls who had found each other in the darkest of times and built a life filled with light. The past was forgiven, the present was cherished, and the future was bright with the legacy they had created. They had proven that love could triumph over judgment, that forgiveness could heal the deepest wounds, that grace was the most powerful force in the universe. God had forgiven them their trespasses, just as they had forgiven those who had trespassed against them. And in doing so, they had found not just redemption, but joy, not just acceptance, but celebration, not just survival, but a life overflowing with love and meaning. As the dance ended and the music faded, Nathan and Katherine stood together, still holding hands, still together, still in love. And that, Katherine thought, was the greatest blessing of all. Not the big house or the successful children or the respect of the community, but this man who had seen her at her lowest point and offered her his hand. This man who had loved her unconditionally and completely. This man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved and allowed her to save him in return. The years that followed were quieter, but no less meaningful. Nathan and Katherine settled into a peaceful old age, surrounded by family, content in the life they had built. They sat together on their porch most evenings, watching the sun set over the New Mexico landscape, counting their blessings and remembering their journey. In the spring of 1920, they celebrated their 43rd wedding anniversary. All 5 of their children came home for the occasion, along with most of the grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren. The house overflowed with love and laughter, with memories shared and new ones created. During the celebration, Joseph stood and raised his glass in a toast. "To my parents," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "My father, by choice, and my mother, by birth. You showed me what it means to love unconditionally, to forgive completely, to build a life based on grace and compassion. Everything I am, everything we all are, we owe to you. Thank you for being the best examples of how to live a good life." "Hear, hear," the rest of the family chorused, raising their glasses. Katherine wiped tears from her eyes, and Nathan held her close, his own eyes suspiciously bright. They had done it. They had taken a situation that seemed hopeless and turned it into something beautiful. They had proven that it was never too late for a new beginning, that love could bloom in the most unlikely circumstances, that God's grace was sufficient for all their needs. As the party continued around them, Nathan leaned down and kissed Katherine's forehead. "I would do it all again," he said softly. "Every moment, every challenge, every joy. I would choose you again and again for all eternity." "And I would choose you," Katherine replied. "Always and forever, I would choose you." They sat together surrounded by the fruits of their love, two people who had defied convention and judgment to build something real and lasting. Their story had begun with shame and rejection, but it had transformed into a testament to the power of love, forgiveness, and grace. They had proven that God's love was big enough to cover all mistakes, all sins, all failures. And they had shown that when people chose to follow God's example of unconditional love, rather than society's harsh judgments, miracles could happen. Katherine Thompson Ellis, once a fallen woman cast out by her church, had become the matriarch of a large and loving family. Nathan Ellis, a lonely cowboy with nothing but his integrity and his faith, had become a respected leader and devoted husband and father. Together, they had rewritten their stories, turning pain into purpose and shame into strength. And as they sat together in the twilight of their lives, they knew that their greatest achievement was not their successful children, or their prosperous ranch, or their standing in the community. Their greatest achievement was each other, the love they had nurtured and protected through 4 decades, the partnership they had built on a foundation of mutual respect and unwavering commitment. The sun set over New Mexico, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple. Another day ending, another blessing to count. Katherine leaned her head on Nathan's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. Their journey together had been long and sometimes difficult, but it had been worth every moment. They had found love when they least expected it, built a family against all odds, and created a legacy that would endure for generations. And it all started with a simple act of kindness, a cowboy who saw a woman in need and offered his hand, a man who believed that God forgives and that his people should too, a man who lived those words every day of his life, showing through his actions what it truly meant to love your neighbor, to care for the vulnerable, to extend grace instead of judgment. As darkness fell and the stars emerged one by one, Katherine and Nathan Ellis sat together in peaceful contentment, grateful for every moment they had been given, thankful for the love that had sustained them through everything. Their story was one of redemption and hope, proof that no situation was beyond the reach of God's grace, that no person was beyond the possibility of a second chance, that love truly could conquer all. And they lived out the rest of their days in happiness and peace, surrounded by the family they had created and the love they had nurtured, a testament to the truth that when we choose forgiveness over judgment, grace over condemnation, love over fear, we open the door to miracles. Their legacy lived on in their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, each generation carrying forward the lessons of compassion and acceptance that Nathan and Katherine had embodied so perfectly. The little house on the Double R Ranch stood as a monument to their love, and the story of how they came together was told and retold through the years, inspiring others to choose kindness over judgment, to offer help instead of condemnation, to remember that we are all in need of grace and all capable of offering it to others. Nathan and Katherine Ellis had lived their lives as an example of what it meant to truly follow the teachings of love and forgiveness, and their influence rippled outward far beyond what they could have ever imagined, touching lives and changing hearts for generations to come.